Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the business club, the virtual business club for the 22nd of July. I hope you're all going to have a very good day. It's good weather, so let's fingers crossed. So that you know that we are recording this session, and if there are any queries regarding GDPR, please do email us and let us know. So welcome, thank you very much to all of you, our delegates, and to our presenters for joining us today. Before we begin, just a few housekeeping notes. We have muted all delegates for the duration of the event. If you have a question, please make sure you type it in the chat box along with your name and company if it's not immediately visible, and we will get to them once each speaker has finished. If you have any technical issues regarding sound or video, then please raise your hand and we will endeavour to resolve. Don't forget you can follow us on Twitter at UoB Business Club, and you can join our LinkedIn group to get updates. You can also kind of put questions to the Twitter account as well if you're so interested. So on to this morning's talks. I'm pleased to announce we have 4 speakers joining us today. Dr. Dan Weekley from the University of Birmingham Business School, Mark Matchett from the KTN, part of Innovate UK, Anna Koch from the CBI, and Katie Hoare from University of Birmingham Careers Network. After each presenter, there'll be a short Q&A, and then we'll move over to the next one. The session this morning should last no more than an hour. Without further ado, let's get cracking. So I'm pleased to introduce our first speaker today. So Dr. Daniel Weekley is a reader in the Department of Management and the Director of Undergraduate Programs in Birmingham Business School. He researches workplace well-being, including the quality of work, work-life balance, and flexible working arrangements, including remote working. He has experience in producing practitioner-focused outputs for organisations and developing and embedding well-being strategies. So without further ado, over to you, Dan.
Thanks, Kate, and thanks for joining us, everyone, this morning. So I thought what would be both timely and probably quite helpful to discuss this morning is the overlap between aspects of workplace well-being and how flexibility is being realised in recent times, and what the future looks like in the short term. I think obviously there's a lot of discussion around how things might change as a result of recent events and how that might impact working routines and in turn workplace well-being. I think it's a really important discussion that needs to be had, that needs to feed into organisational strategy, needs to feed into kind of practical day-to-day working routines as well. So I'm keen we kind of start thinking about these things as early as possible. You know, I mean, obviously think that the situation around us is constantly changing still. But I think one of the things that businesses, universities, any stakeholders involved in this process would be best placed to do is to start preparing and thinking about these things early. So I titled my presentation Workplace Flexibility and Wellbeing in Post-COVID Era. You'll note on the first slide there's a picture of my dog wearing one of my shirts. It's a flashback to one of the last couple of days as I was in work actually before all this kicked off, I decided he looked like he was in a business-like mood that day. But I also included on the front slide the picture on the left saying it's Monday, go to work, with obviously the recent announcement last week around return to the office from the 1st of August, or potential return to the office, I should say. I thought it was quite timely, although a little bit tongue-in-cheek. So do we want to move on to the next slide? So as a bit of context, I thought it would be useful. I'm sure most people joining us this morning are aware of a number of these kind of statistics, but I think it's useful to introduce them as a level of context today. So there's some contextual data there around businesses that had to cease trading, the furloughing of employees, workers who are still in work, who've ended up working in reduced hours, But with the focus of my presentation this morning, the key statistics are in the last two bullets on that list of contextual stats. The first one being 47% of employees reported working remotely at least some of the time, and 86% of these doing so as a result of the pandemic at its peak. 38% of workers reporting working at home exclusively, so it's 47% at least some of the time, but almost 2 in 5 workers reporting working at home exclusively at its peak, which was the middle of June. Noticeably, that's already decreased to 27%, and that was the most recent data capture, the 7th to 12th of July, that I could access in the last week. So the rapid expansion of remote working that we've seen, and it is a huge expansion of remote working, given that the data prior to all of this happening evidenced fairly consistently around 2 to 3% of workers who would exclusively work at home, and then a further 7 to 8% of workers who work at home some of the time, so maybe 10% in total who do some form of home working. And of course, we saw that increased to almost half at its peak recently. Now, in principle, that change is obviously temporary. It's prompted by the global pandemic. And I think one of the key things that we need to take stock of here is that what this doesn't represent is flexibility being suddenly implemented to allow people to work to their own routines and own preferences. This is a fairly enforced, mandated response that's related to obviously the global pandemic and health and safety and all of the rest of it. So can we move to the next slide? That doesn't mean, though, that remote working in this context doesn't offer a significant number of benefits. And it also doesn't mean that we can't use our existing understanding of remote working or more specifically home working to help us understand what those benefits are and how they can be realized. The good news is there's potential benefits for both workers and organizations, for both employees and employers, and a number of potential benefits to be had. So there's a quite a significant global body of evidence that's been built around, you know, for a number of decades now, that evidences a number of these benefits can be generated. So increased control, autonomy and flexibility for workers, enhanced accessibility to work, so enabling workers who may not otherwise be able to access paid employment to do so. And that's particularly relevant, obviously, in current context with at-risk groups and other factors to consider. Greater job satisfaction and work-life balance, so a key aspect of workplace well-being to consider there for workers, and productivity and job performance benefits, which is an overlapping benefit for both workers and organisation. And some of those obviously derive from the other elements, having more control, having greater job satisfaction, feeding into job performance. For the organisation, again, that productivity and job performance benefit. Also the potential to reduce accommodation costs. So we've heard about a number of large businesses reconsidering their office space and how they deploy their workforce. Lower absenteeism if people are have got better work-life balance and feel happy with their jobs, and that may well feed into their physical health as well and result in less absence from work. And the potential improved customer service and client service benefits associated with workers having greater job satisfaction, greater control over their work and being able to interact with work as they wish. These outcomes are very much contingent on how this is implemented and how people buy into remote working, how people, whether employers and employees alike embrace it and take it on in the way it should be. Historically, the barriers to wider use and the reason we saw quite limited use of forms of remote work, but in particular home working, centered around concerns around trust, around whether workers would misuse company time, around technology, and of course we've seen that technology can work for us, at least for the most part, and health and safety concerns around having to do things like health and safety checks and equipment checks for people, provide people with relevant resource. Can we move on to the next slide? So what I wanted to do is then, using that contextual understanding, speak quite briefly about what this means in the context of workplace well-being and how these things very much intersect. So how good home working intersects with workplace well-being benefits. So I've developed a framework that looks at workplace well-being that's been developed out of a fairly extensive piece of research I've done that looked into existing frameworks and models. Basically operates with a more strategic, higher level, which has three main tenets to it, or principles, which are culture, around the culture of the organization and creating the right kind of culture for workers and the business to succeed, around structure, which is about policies, leadership, that kind of thing, and around the environment we provide, which is both the physical environment, but also the environmental state as well. So thinking, feeding in more to kind of mental environment. At the more operational level, then we have 6 dimensions of workplace well-being. Job properties, which deals with the kind of inherent components of work: autonomy, variety, complexity, resources we have at our disposal. Flexibility, which, just as it sounds, which is highly relevant to the discussion around remote working. Rewarding careers, which is more to do with what are sometimes called hygiene factors: pay, contracts, training and development, those kind of things. The physical space and activity, so the physical environment we work in, which again is very relevant to discussions around remote working, given people are working in their homes. Relationships, also highly relevant here, thinking about how we maintain contact, how we maintain relationships between leaders and workers, between employees and other employees, and between employees and clients. How do we maintain those relationships in a remote context? And giving, which is a particular dimension focused around how we might give ourselves to others, not just in terms of things like formal volunteering, but in terms of mentoring, helping others. It links to the relationships dimension. So these kind of dimensions are more operational. They help us understand the kind of day-to-day of how we understand remote working. So move to the next slide, and I'll talk through the kind of concept in terms of these 6 dimensions of looking at remote working in the current context. So in terms of job properties, there's a number of different aspects of this that we need to consider in terms of successful adoption of remote working for the benefit of workplace well-being, but in order to realize those dual benefits, those mutual benefits we talked about earlier for employer and employee. So the suitability and adaptability of job tasks. So what we're talking about there is about job design. So one of the things we may need to do in all of this is think about how we redesign jobs or look at jobs in different ways. In particular, a focus on task rather than time is a really relevant thing to think about when we're thinking about adapting to remote working. Avoiding micromanagement and monitoring. So there's a lot of technical control, what are called technical control systems out there that help us understand what workers are doing all the time. Is that actually necessary? You know, if we identify deliverables, outputs, then that should drive our activity. Concerns around new forms of presenteeism. You know, do we need our cameras on in meetings? Do we need to dress for work? Those discussions need to be held at local levels and decisions made and policies developed to help identify requirements of workers and what the expectations are. Motivation and purpose. Trying to keep people motivated can be a particular concern when people are working remotely and not interacting with each other. In terms of flexibility, it's mainly focused around concerns around work-life balance, so spillover between work and non-work time, work and non-work space, potential for overwork. I mean, there's concerns obviously around underwork and people, you know, slacking off. You know, the gardens have never looked so good around where I live. But there's also, there's also the very real concern around people overworking and never turning off, and that's a big concern. And balancing availability. When are you and are you not available when you're always in principle available? In terms of careers, historically concerns have centered on things like invisibility, loss of identity, job security. Those are all, kind of question marks against them at the minute, because we're all doing it, which is what, or at least a much bigger proportion of workers are doing this, I should say. So those kind of impacts might not be the same. In terms of giving practical difficulties in working in virtual teams, so how do we collaborate? How do we share? How do we share knowledge and understanding? How do we develop others? How do we help others? And loss of informal interactions. And that feeds in neatly to relationships, where we have to consider things around isolation, loss of social and professional networks. Been highly relevant, of course, with people, especially those who live on their own, literally being on their own all of the time for a couple of months when we were in lockdown situation. Increased work family stress, people all in the same space all of the time. People with children have obviously had very difficult circumstances at times to deal with in terms of managing care alongside work recently. And there's been some emerging evidence around gender dynamics and who takes on that care, who takes that responsibility as well. And then finally, around the issues of physical space, obviously highly relevant. How do we create a workspace within the home that works? From the employer side, employers have a some level of duty of care to think about health and safety of workers, but does that create potential invasion of privacy? There's questions around all those things. Provision of equipment and resources then becomes a big part of this. Do we need webcams? Do we need new laptops? Do we need new software? All of these things become relevant. And then, of course, all the physical implications of doing this type of work at home. It's very sedentary, spending a lot of time sat down. Promotion of things like standing meetings is a really good idea. The eye strain, musculoskeletal problems caused by this type of work, and concerns around healthy eating. I won't go into that in any more detail at the minute. So should we move on to the next slide? So there's a lot for employers to consider there, and I guess the point is that this discussion this morning, what I was hoping to do is start getting those thoughts moving and start getting people thinking about some of these things. One of the things I think that really characterizes what's happening at the minute is that, yes, it is temporary, but it has the potential to create quite a significant shift in thinking around how we work. And I think my angle on this is very much that flexibility is key. So I'm not saying that everyone should be working at home. I'm definitely not saying that. There's very real reasons why being in a workplace can be beneficial in terms of knowledge sharing, in terms of that social contact, in terms of trying to get some of the agglomeration benefits of ideas sharing and being together in one place. And I think what is important is flexibility, is around providing structures in terms of policies and strategy around flexible working, around how we operate our working routines, around culture that promotes good working behaviours in terms of allowing people the flexibility to work at home or work in an office and combine those different locations, and having the right kind of environment to do that in. So it's about rethinking the physical space we work in, looking at open plan, shared and private workspaces and how we can redeploy them, blending home working and office working, and giving consideration to certain groups of workers who may need to work at home for longer. So at-risk groups, those types of individuals who may not be ready to return to the office straight away. And then, of course, there's the concern around balancing the costs of supporting remote working against the cost savings of reducing the size of office space and getting that balance right. And I think that all of this can be done very successfully at a strategic level, by putting in place a strategy which identifies ways of supporting and monitoring workers in this process, but without intruding on their working routines, focusing very centrally on this idea of being more flexible rather than just people working at home or just people working in an office. And if we can do the last slide. So a potential route forward for this, just to finish off, just to kind of further sell some of my ideas, is through adopting an agile approach. So adopting an agile approach is a bigger picture thing than just letting people work at home. It's about being agile throughout the organization. It's about thinking about leading by example, adopting agile practices throughout the whole organization. From day-to-day working routines and attitudes right through to big picture strategic aims and missions. It's about putting in place the agile approach into governance systems around flexible working, ICT, company equipment and data, all of those things. And it's also about, of course, creating an environment that enables this. So in terms of workspaces, in terms of providing people with relevant equipment to enable them to work at home, on the move, in client offices and in the office, that your own workplace office as well, and providing an environment that enables collaboration and at the same time private concentration. So an agile approach is potentially a really good route forward. I think that's the key point. So I'll end there in the interest of time, Kate.
Lovely. Thank you very much. That's been great. Any questions for Dan? If you can pop them into the Q&A box, that'd be great. I think that was very useful, very interesting. We've certainly seen, just from our own perspective at the University of Birmingham in our office, the remote working has been fine, but it's the social interaction and the kind of casual water cooler chats that you get, and it sparks an idea that spirals into something, and that's really quite. I think we've certainly been missing that, and it's how to generate that off online is very, very difficult. Whilst
yeah, so just responding to this first comment we've had around balance, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, both balance and choice, I think are central in this. I mean, although some of it anecdotal, I think that there's been quite a bit of evidence coming forward around the importance of some people being able to get back to the workplace sooner rather than others, and that while some people may be in both a comfortable environment and one that enables them to work effectively at home, others aren't in that position. I know a couple of people who've got young children who found it very difficult to combine that with work, and obviously when things like childcare weren't operating, that was particularly problematic. Trying to share that responsibility throughout a working day and combine it with deadlines, with meeting times and things like that is very difficult. So absolutely, balance and choice are really important in this. And I think one of the things that's really important to consider as an employer in these early stages of this kind of return to work, or whatever you want to call it, is around providing a level of choice for workers to determine when they come back, but within some level of constraint around, well, you need to be able to do your job, and obviously there's that to consider as well.
Absolutely. And it's I would also like to add that the business school will be publishing a report on the 29th of July on the changing future attitudes to flexible working, which has been led by Dr. Hurley Burkett and Dr. Sarah Forbes from the School of Management. So we will circulate that report when it becomes available to today's delegates as well. Okay, that's lovely. Thank you very much, Dan. If we can now move on to the next presenter, please. Mark Matchett from the KTN. So Mark has an engineering career spanning almost 30 years before he joined the KTN in 2014, putting that experience to good use working for the automotive sector lead for 3 years. Mark then joined the KTP program in 2017, where he now spends his time helping businesses to grow through accessing the expertise within UK universities. Over to you, Mark.
Thanks, Kate. Hopefully you can hear me. And thanks to Dan for that interesting chat there. Who'd have thought that Birmingham University have got someone researching workplace well-being strategies? I never knew that. But you never know. It just goes to show that unless you sort of put yourself a better bit and start researching and tuning into some of these little webinars, you don't really understand what's going on in the background sometimes. So thanks to Dan. And if you feel thinking, well, I want to get access to the knowledge that Dan's got and some of the research that he's undertook there to understand a bit more how I can implement that into my business, then this next 10 or 15 minutes might explain a possible route to that. So I'm going to be talking to you about, next slide please, Dan. I will just hit my enter key then. Talk about knowledge transfer partnerships, which we abbreviate to KTPs, and particularly a strand of KTPs which is focused on management. And I'll tell you a little bit about how you can access that and what to do next if you're interested. Next, please. So yeah, KTPs are part of Innovate UK's portfolio of business grants. Obviously, they do lots and lots of things in research and development, and they've got all sorts of programs going on. But one of the things that they also try to promote is getting business to work with universities to access some of the knowledge and some of the research that takes place, so that people can actually make a change to the business and make money from it and make themselves more competitive, developing new business concepts, new products, new strategies, so they can ultimately contribute to the UK economy. And typically KTPs enable that partnership between universities and business, and that to work on issues that are constraining business growth, holding back innovation, stalling strategic plans. You might be a business that's got an ambition to do X, and there's one key piece of knowledge that's stopping you having the confidence to crack on and go ahead with that. And that's where a KTP can help. So if you find yourself in that situation, then KTP may be for you. The slides just flicked a little bit then. Okay, so there's for SMEs, the funding rate, which I know everyone's always very interested in, is 2/3. So the cost of these programs is funded by Innovate UK at a rate of 67%, and it is effectively what we call a three-way partnership. There's obviously a business, there's obviously a group of academics from an institution, but there's also the project associate, which is the graduate or the appropriately qualified person that's going to actually be the resource for the project, and it is very much a partnership because there's outcomes for all three parties there from a KTP. So move on, next slide. So I think the best way to explain what KTPs are and how they feel and look is to give you a few examples. So I've got a project with a company that makes plastic parts, for want of a better phrase. Going back in the dim and distant past, I had some chemistry knowledge and developed a polymer which worked very well in this particular application. But over the years, I became complacent, and the chemistry knowledge went from the business, and the manufacturing knowledge started to build up. But of course, the bigger competition is always innovating in polymer chemistry, and effectively the business found itself in a place where it needed to regain that knowledge and start from a base where it really started to understand its own processes and its own chemistry, so that it could reinvent that to compete in new markets. So that was an example of a project. We have projects in advanced manufacturing. We have projects with people that have got very, very bespoke IT needs, if they're looking at AI or machine learning around a specific application. And obviously that's an area that can be a bit scary to some folks, an area where the university is coming quite well. We also do things around implementing digital transformations, product design capability, but these days we're also looking at this kind of softer subject area of management capability. And a couple of examples there of the sort of things that we can work on in this area. So next slide, please. So management KTP is part of the UK industrial strategy. It's funded. These projects they're funded by a pot of cash that BEIS, that's the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, have put into the KTP programme. It's £15 million to be allocated, majority of that will be allocated to projects in the next 12 months. I think we're probably going to get about 200 projects out of that. And if you're a company that's less than 500 employees, then you're eligible to apply. So let's go on the next slide. Yeah. Oh, right. Yeah. So the key challenges, what does a management KTP look like? The key challenges in these projects need to be management focused. They are very, very much management focused and not too much about the tech. Yes, we can have tech implemented during the project, but the emphasis has to be about how the project enables management to use that tech and change its management strategy. You have to consider the management skills that the KTP will bring to the business, and how it would embed a new management strategy. And looking at the projects that have been funded so far, then what we see is that there's a lot of family-run businesses that are looking for that next step up, looking for that next little piece of inspiration to give them the bigger company approaches to enable this, the larger growth plans. Things where people might be doubling or trebling the turnover in 5 or 10 years. And for companies where, you might have a 20, 30 man business, it might be a family run business. The gaffer, for want of a better phrase, works very much in the business, and he knows what good looks like. But as the business grows and the gaffer starts to work on the business rather than in, that intuition, is lost. And sometimes, we need a new way to manage the business, a new way to manage people, and a new way to measure performance and gauge what good looks like. So next slide. So yeah, just a couple of ideas of what some people consider to be productivity blockers. Blurred accountability is one. This is where you have a job that needs doing, and sometimes you might get a situation where you've got 2 people that think it's their job, and other times you might get a situation where no one thinks it's their job. So obviously that's not good for productivity. Optimism bias is something that people talk about sometimes. People that don't monitor things that well. Something will turn up mentality. This kind of leads to unsustainable sort of growth plans where it's sort of project-based growth. One big project comes along, happy days, eye comes off the ball, productivity on the commercial front drops off, big project ends, no business. So what we try to do is get people to think more strategically about growth and start to target projects that are good for the business. Employee ownership of the company vision. They need to be clear on what success looks like. Does everyone in the business understand that? That's about the culture and the structure sometimes. Failure to value and build creativity, an environment where creativity can thrive. We get a lot of businesses that work, they're so close to the coalface, they can't really see what they're good at sometimes, and they can't see their own strengths. So it's about trying to open that up a little bit and get that discussion going. I think there's also a tendency for companies sometimes to be a little bit unambitious because they feel they can't manage the risk. Obviously, if you're making, if you've got big plans to grow, you're making some big strategic decisions, and that involves, capital resources and commitment. And sometimes companies don't take that next step because they just think they don't know how to manage the risk. So, it's about helping people to do that as well. And realizing the potential to digitization, there are still a lot of businesses that are very, very much behind the curve on that. So to understand how management can change its practices and change its processes. We talk about product design as well as mechanical design. The sort of product design that makes people want to buy an Apple phone or a Samsung sort of device. These things look nice, they feel nice, they're tactile. How do we inject some of that design capability into products and services that people just take for granted? And again, talking about talent and empowering of people, as you get towards a business that's growing faster, then you need to nurture talent. You need to have those succession planning things moving on. And just touching a little bit on what Dan was talking about earlier on, mental health, and how do we manage that it's very relevant in today's environment. And that's something that people need to consider as well. So next slide. So having looked at the, so I apologise for the quality of this slide to start with. This is a screenshot from something I didn't come out that well, but hopefully everyone can see the big words in the centre. So I did a quick analysis of the projects that have been, the management KTP projects that have been funded so far, and the main themes are those that you can see in the bigger letters in the centre. So, you know, a lot of smaller businesses are looking to, you know, measure internal performance. You know, if you can't measure it, it's very, very difficult to manage it. So if you start to measure things a little bit more closely, then that starts to bring people around to the way of thinking that actually maybe I need to rethink my business process design, and if I've got better measurement and facts, I can make better strategic decisions. You know, we can change the culture of the business because we can give people benchmarks and targets more easily. You know, we can start to think about more sustainable growth, and we can have a better business strategy. We can think a little bit more about digital marketing strategy. If we can measure our success in that area, or the degree of efficiency in that area, we can make some changes. And servitization is one that comes through quite a lot as well. So just food for thought really on that slide. So yeah, moving on. Yeah, so the art of management KTP, people-centric management, only management, and must be strategic. So it's not about, you know, we have had some projects which have been around Industry 4, and you might say that that's a management capability, but those type of projects need to focus on how management benefits from the technology, not how do we implement the technology. We can do a little bit of tech, but it has to major on the management skill and the capability of the management team. And these things are very, very bespoke to the company. So, you know, what I'm trying to give you here is a flavour for some of the things that have been done in the past. But, you know, it is very, very much tailored to each individual company needs. One of the measures that we have to look at to just check eligibility on management KTPs is the level of productivity within a business as it stands. And there's an ONS tool, which if you Google ONS labour productivity, it kind of takes you straight to the tool. It doesn't take much completing. You need a little bit more information than is published on Companies House for most businesses, but it doesn't take that much completing, and they give you a gauge as to where you are against your peer group in the UK sector. So if you're scoring quite low on that, then you're going to be considered, you know, very eligible for management KTPs. If you're getting something like 75–80%, then it might be a struggle to justify it. So, you know, we're looking for the people that really need the help for this particular program. So yeah, next slide. Yeah, so, you know, the next steps, I think, you know, when I first started talking this morning, you know, who'd have thought that Birmingham University have got someone like Dan that's researching workplace well-being strategies, and unless you start talking to people, then you're not going to know what's going on. So I think, you know, if you're interested in just getting a view and just getting someone to give you an idea of what might be possible within your business, then, you know, get in touch with the university, get in touch with myself, and we can organise some kind of a visit or some kind of a conference call, maybe in the current circumstances, and just to give you some ideas and get a flavour for what people are doing. So that's probably the first port of call, to get some fresh thinking. You know, of course, there's no pressure here. It's up to the individual business teams and management teams to decide what they want to do. But, you know, we think that, you know, you need to do something positive and do something creative to make some positive change within your business. And I think we can help you on the roads to that with the KTP. So next slide. Yeah, so just an example of creativity right in the early days. You may have seen this on the news when COVID first kicked off. This was an outdoor restaurant on the harbour in Amsterdam who decided COVID wasn't going to stop them serving meals to their customers. So they installed a fleet of greenhouses and started delivering food on planks of wood, which, you know, it's just a little bit of different thinking, isn't it? How you survive change, and inevitably that might even be, you know, a quirky feature that helps that business grow as it moves forward. So it's about reinventing the business and just thinking that little bit differently sometimes. And just my final slide. So this was something that I wrote in a final report for a KTP recently. I won't say who the company was, but after I wrote it down, I thought, that's a pretty good statement. Did I really write that? But anyway, apparently I did. But, you know, what we did in this particular project was we took a business, it was a black country business who didn't really think much about themselves. They employ 50 people, they make stuff, right? So they didn't consider themselves to be particularly techie. But what the KTP delivered was, yeah, it delivered the individual competencies at the individual level within the business. But the bigger picture was that business, the confidence level in that business was so high at the end of the project. You know, and it resulted in the company developing its own roadmap of new concepts that it wants to work, innovative concepts that it wants to work on in the future, and a belief in themselves that they're, you know, they're at the top of the game amongst their peers. And truly, what they did in some areas was probably actually, you know, leading with the European sector that they operate. You know, so it's not just about knowledge transfer; it's about giving your business the confidence to go on and do new things and do better things. Just one last final word. If you want to know a little bit more about KTPs, a little bit more in depth, we have got a webinar, which hopefully we can post the link to that, Kate, in the chat maybe. There's a full-hour webinar on this topic taking place at 11:15 on Friday of this week. So we'll post the link and hopefully we'll see some people signing up for that.
I was going to mention that, but thanks very much, Mark. Lovely, thank you. And also, Mark will be working with ourselves on a virtual KTP drop-in day on the 9th of September. So if you are interested in having a one-to-one chat with Mark regarding KTP, management or otherwise, then do let me know and we can schedule in a chat for then. Thank you very much.
16 minutes, that wasn't bad, Kate. 16 minutes.
No, happy with that. Lovely, okie dokie. In the interest of time, we'll skip over. If there are any questions, we'll get them at the end. So now, if I may, I'm going to move over to Anna Kosh, who is a Senior Policy Advisor at the CBI, who leads on diversity and inclusion policy. She works across a variety of topics, such as how to close existing pay gaps, improving mental health and well-being in the workplace, as well as minimising the risk of sexual harassment at work. Most recently, Anna led on the work on the Bridge the Gap guide to help companies close their ethnicity pay gap. So Anna, morning, over to you.
Yes, good morning everyone, and thank you so much for joining such an early hour on a Tuesday morning. Very much appreciated. And thank you so much for the speakers. So my presentation is going to be on the impact of COVID-19 on flexible working and mental health, and how this will have knock-on impacts and effects on diversity and inclusion in the workplace. And it's very much built on what we've already heard from Dan previously. And I think I will add some more flavor to that by actually providing some company examples. So what you'll be hearing from me today is very much what we've heard from our members. So it's company examples and kind of thoughts and feedback we receive from businesses all over the country. So the first thing I want to say is really that flexible working and mental health has been very much on the agenda of companies before the pandemic started. And this has been an agenda that CBI has been driving as well. We actually published a guide in 2018 about the importance of mental health and the importance of employers supporting the mental health and well-being of their employees. It's called Front of Mind, and it was very much about how it is about, you know, leading from the top and actually enabling this discussion about mental health. This is considered as a taboo quite often, but obviously it has been kind of boosted, these topics, by the pandemic, and has been accelerated with a lot of people, many people working from home, and mental health being a big concern for employers. So next slide, please. So today I want to touch upon three things really. I want to talk about what and how companies have adapted to the pandemic. So just again, give you a couple of examples of what we've seen and heard from members. The initial learnings we have so far heard about, and also what we think the impact of all of that will be on diversity and inclusion going forward. So if you look at the first slide, please, the next slide. So what have we learned and heard from companies as to how they have adapted to the pandemic? So we hear quite a bit that, for example, managers ensure that at the beginning of every one-to-one meeting, they will actually talk for about 10 to 15 minutes to their employees to actually hear how they're doing, how is their workload, how is their mental health, to actually have this conversation and to really understand how they can support their employees. We also hear from companies that are implementing pub quizzes and virtual challenges and actually keep rotating them. So whenever they see that the attendance is falling, they have a new event and a new thing to actually bring people together, to have the social aspect as well in the workplace, kind of in the virtual workplace that we had previously in physical workspace. A lot of companies are putting in specific training for the managers to actually support them in how they can virtually manage a team, because it's still very different, right, to virtually manage a team. So it's about understanding how you can communicate with your employees, to ask them what, if it's by phone, if it's via Zoom, so to understand how they want to be communicated with, and to actually really try and support your employees through that, and how often they want to be talked to as well. And that also enables them to support their mental health. They're also very good, a lot of them are very good in regular communication, so actually really trying to communicate all the different changes that are happening in government legislation, communicating how they are making their workplace COVID secure, for example, is also a big thing that a lot of companies have been telling us about. But also, most of them have actually allowed their employees to fully flex their working hours so that they can actually take care of children or take care of elderly relatives, and to really have their actual life and the other challenges that come with it, so that they actually can face them as well. A lot of companies are also running pulse checks and surveys to understand the challenges of their employees. So again, how is their work-life balance doing? How is their mental health doing? So a lot of these things are happening currently, and this is how companies have actually stepped up and really tried to adapt to the current situation, really understand how their employees are feeling, and to support them in the current phase. Now, if you look at the next slide, please. What are the learnings that we have seen so far? Again, this is very much taken from conversations we had with businesses. I think the first learning is that flexible working at all levels of the company is actually possible. Quite often we've previously heard from members, oh, you know, we can't do this role because it's actually a role you need to be there full time, you need to be there all day, and it can only be done office based. Well, actually now, in most cases, we've proven that actually these roles can be done from home and they can be done flexibly. So we hear from employers that they're very aware that in the future, when there is a flexible working request, it'll be very difficult to turn it down. So I think that is one opportunity that we have seen throughout the pandemic so far. The other one is about productivity is actually up. And during the crisis, almost 3/4 of employers stated that they were actually pleasantly surprised about the productivity of their team during lockdown, and over half actually believe that their teams are more productive working from home than they have been working from the office. I think this is quite interesting, and there have been quite a few research is going on inside companies where they actually monitored, for example, email exchanges, calls, and so on and so forth. Well, actually, it showed that productivity was indeed on the up during this time. Another opportunity we see is around attracting diverse talent. Obviously, it has always been important, and we've always known that flexibility and flexible working is something that supports the attraction of diverse talent. And before the crisis, 81% of people said that they were likely to choose an employer that had a better flexible working offer than others. And we expect this figure to go up significantly after the pandemic, because we have seen that flexible working is possible even in very senior roles. Another opportunity that we have seen, and I think a big step, is that more and more companies are actually very comfortable talking about mental health. We've heard from companies that they didn't have a mental health plan in place before the pandemic started, and they actually implemented one, I don't know, from one day to the next, basically. They had to be very, very specific, very precise to actually do something about mental health. They've put a plan together and they've implemented it. And I think now they're very comfortable talking about how people are feeling, how they're coping with the pandemic. And they're actually thinking about how they want to actually take this forward. when the pandemic is over. And I think that is a very important step. So this topic of taboo about talking about mental health is actually something has become more natural to many more companies and has been a big concern for a lot of employers. I think that is a really, really important opportunity that we need to kind of work on in the future. Now the next slide is around challenges. So it has already been mentioned, it's health and safety is a challenge. And it's basically around what is the legal obligation of the employer towards the employees if they're working from home. Let's say that you are working from home for a very long time. What's the obligation at some point that the employer has to take? For example, you have a back issue at the end of the day, and can you actually go to court and open a legal case against your employer for not taking care of your health? So I think that is something that employers have been very, really aware of, that if people work from home on a long period of time, that actually they have to make sure that their workstations are appropriate for home working. Another challenge that has been identified is mental health. So we have already talked about isolation, the feeling of isolation during lockdown. Then you have obviously the challenge of childcare, of care responsibilities, homeschooling for many parents. So that is also a big challenge that can strain mental health, but also that the dividing lines between your private life and your working life are much blurred in that period of time. So it's the challenge of overworking, of not being able to switch off, that we already have heard about. And then another challenge is around employee relations. So if we emerge from this pandemic and we have a new normal, what does it actually mean in terms of relationship between the employer and the employee? How do you adapt to this new management style? How do you engage your workforce in an efficient, effective way? And how do you create a sense of, if we talk about diversity and inclusion, how do you create a sense of belonging for your employees? So I think these are the challenges that we very, very clearly see from our conversations with businesses. So what does it actually mean for diversity and inclusion? If you now look at the next slide, please. I think one big thing to state before we go on to the slide is that during crises, there's always a big risk that we actually take a step back on our diversity and inclusion agenda, and that diversity and inclusion gets put back on the back burner, and that, of course, companies are currently very much focused on surviving. But the question is, how can we actually keep the diversity agenda going so that we don't take any steps back with regard to, for example, gender pay gap reporting? So how can we actually make sure that while we think about the new normal, that we actually make sure that diversity and inclusion is part of this new normal? And when I say new normal, is that more people be working from home potentially on a long-term basis. So I think there are a couple of questions here. So one of them is how we actually make sure to create a culture of the organization where more and more people are working from home. So how do we actually make sure that people still feel connected to their workplace, even though maybe they don't go to work every day, but they work from home? How can we overcome this feeling of isolation? How can we create social events for our employees? And how do we have healthy team dynamics? How do we hire people? How do we promote people? I think there's a danger here that if we don't if we don't hire people face to face, or if we don't see them at some point in the hiring process, that there is kind of like an alienation almost happening. So how do we make sure that we don't build in any new biases in the promotion and the hiring process? How do we make sure that just because we don't see people face to face anymore during the hiring process, that we don't start hiring more people that look like us and sound like us? How do we make sure that we actually hire people from BAME background, older workers, people with disability? So I think that's really important to think about, and to make sure that if we work from home more, that we actually have tools in place to actually reduce the biases in our hiring and promotion processes. And I think another thing that we hear a lot from members is that they've seen a higher degree of empathy in their employer, because they actually see day by day their actual living condition, or how they're caring for the children. But there has to be more understanding between the employer and the employee in many cases. So how can we actually make sure that when we go forward, we keep this understanding of each other's life situations, and how can we make sure that it is reflected in our flexible working and how we communicate. And I think one final thought about how diversity and inclusion can be included, or how we have to think about it in the future, is that potentially when we go back to work, it will be around, there will be more anxiety in people because they might not feel safe in the workplace. So how can we make sure that actually when we go back to work, or do we have to go back to work, can we just leave people if they don't feel safe? Can we just leave people to work from home for a longer period of time? So of course all of these things also depend on policies and how government is supporting businesses. I think one specific thing here to mention is around schools and childcare. I think if we talk about closing gender pay gap, then it is very important that schools do open at some point soon to support women to come back to the workplace. It's also about childcare, kindergartens. We hear a lot in the press around how many of them are actually not able to sustain themselves financially. So how to make actually sure that they survive the crisis. I think all these things will be part of a conversation about how we can make sure that if we transition to a new normal, we actually bake diversity and inclusion into it. And just a final slide here, if we please change. What do we hear about what's next for businesses? I think it has already been mentioned, a lot of companies are talking about closing their offices, some of their offices at least. A lot of them are talking about budgets to actually support their employees with equipment to work from home. Some of them are actually considering to, for example, pay electricity bills for their employees if they continue to work from home on a long-term basis. A lot of companies are indicating that they will actually let their employees work from home despite what has been announced by the Prime Minister last week. So this is an initial conversation we had with businesses, but a lot of them are very, very aware that their employees are concerned to go back. So they want to keep it this way and let them work at home. And they will have a hybrid model where people will be allowed to work from home, but also work in the office a couple of days in the week. So that is what companies are saying. Thank you very much.
Lovely, that's great. Thank you so much, Anna. What I've taken away from that is that the positive gains from lockdown we shouldn't be losing. We should make sure as employers that we maintain that, which I think is critical.
Okay.
Thank you very much. In the interest of time, because we're running a few minutes behind, we'll just quickly move on to Katie, who's got just a couple of things she wants to say. Katie is University of Birmingham's PGR Entrepreneurial Development Officer in Careers Network. Katie supports postgraduate researchers with enterprise skills development for all career paths, as well as business startup and consultancy. She runs a variety of training programs, including a virtual consultancy challenge and an enterprise summer school, which features industry partners as clients. She's also leading on the university's involvement in ingenuity, which she'll be talking about now. Katie, thank you very much for holding on. Last but not least, off you go.
Thanks. Yeah, so I just wanted to let you know about an opportunity through your partnership with the university. So the university is taking part in the Ingenuity programme, which has two pathways. There's one pathway which is more for students and academics around business creation and spin out. But the second pathway is all about innovating within an existing organisation. And it's all about those big kind of regional agendas to help the UK recover and have a better society after the pandemic is over. So there's opportunity for training and support, but also investment as well. So I just wanted to let you know that this would be open to you due to your or having an existing relationship with the university. Next slide, please, Ben. So they've picked 4 challenge topics. These are based on the SDGs, but looking very much at the UK specifically. And we are in the West Midlands region of the challenge. So we're looking very much at the West Midlands, and there's various different people involved. So as I said, there are students, there could be academics involved, local businesses, but also policymakers and the LEPs as well. So it's quite a big group of people that are going to be looking at these different challenges. So the first challenge is all about prosperity. The second one is about building better communities. The third challenge is improving health. And the fourth is about tackling climate change. And the idea is that if your business is already working in one of these areas, or you had plans and dreams to do something in one of these areas, something that is new and would have a positive impact on society as well, then this would very much be applicable for you to apply to. Next slide, please, Ben. So the benefits of taking part. So what kind of things would you do? So you'd be working in a diverse group. So there's opportunities to network and meet different people who might work with you to help your organisation to move this idea forward. There's various keynotes, there's various talks and ideation workshops available. So hearing from the leaders in these different areas and talking about kind of the realities of these challenges, why these challenges exist, and some suggestions around what could be done about it. As I said, there's lots of different people involved, and you would pitch your idea, get feedback from a panel and have the chance to win some investment and support. Now, I will say that obviously the investment pot isn't enough for a massive new kind of technology or invention or something like that. This is much more about kind of those more like social impact ideas of changes and things that are going to have an impact in those challenge areas. Next slide, please. So just to let you know the timeline, there are events happening in July and August, but they're more for information. So there's absolutely no need to go to any of those events, and the keynotes from those events will be available afterwards. The actual program itself opens for applications in September. You would apply directly through the Ingenuity website. I will say Ingenuity isn't University of Birmingham's thing. We're taking part in it along with other universities such as BCU, Warwick, Coventry in the West Midlands region, but there are other universities in other regions taking part as well. So you would apply directly to them, but you would choose University of Birmingham as being your kind of partner member. And so registrations will be open up until the beginning of November, or applications I should say, and then the top applications get through to the programme. So on the programme there's online training materials available, there's some events as well in November, December time, which will be held at Warwick University. At the moment, hopefully face-to-face, but obviously we'll have to see what happens. And then over the kind of winter period, it's all about how does the business plan work, what does it look like, and submitting that business plan in the middle of February. And then there's the pitching and then finding out about investment. So that's what the programme looks like. And final slide. Yeah, so that was just to let you know, as I said, that there are the events happening, but there's absolutely no need to attend those events. However, if you wanted to find out more about one of those specific areas, hear some talks and do some ideation with other attendees, please do feel free. So to register to find out any more information, you just go to ingenuityimpact.org. I think I put the website was on the first slide as well. So are the slides being sent around, Kate? Yeah, okay, brilliant. So you've got all the information that you need, but you should be able to find everything you need on their website as well.
Super. That's been, excuse me, that's been great. Thank you so much, Katie. It was a very quick whistle-stop tour around this programme, but we wanted to make sure that the delegates understood that there are some further funding and further opportunities available for entrepreneurial activities. And just don't forget that you can obviously use that as a stepping stone to engaging with future Innovate UK funding as well. So it just remains for me to say thank you very much to this morning's speakers, Dan, Mark, Anna and Katie. Please make sure you put the next event in your diary. We'll take a break for August, but the next one will be on the 22nd of September. looking at the energy picture, where we are at the moment, and also looking at future funding. So don't forget to join the Business Club on LinkedIn and follow us on Twitter at UoB Business Club. We really do welcome your feedback. These events are as much for you as they are for us. So we do look forward to hearing your feedback, any kind of interested topics that you would be interested in hearing about on future events as well. And that's it for me. Thank you very much for attending this morning. We've run a few minutes over. I hope that's okay with everyone, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you very much.